peace and understanding. How's everybody doing? Wanted to continue a follow up on part two of the South Baton Rouge video, which I posted and kind of described how the demographics of South Baton Rouge is basically the remnants of the Magnolia Mound plantation. The totality of the community was once a plantation where enslaved individuals lived. I pointed out some names and some dates and some individuals. One in particular where I'll talk a little bit about Mayor Robert A. Hart. But before I point that out, I want to make a mention of LSU being a border of the neighborhood. First of all, again, shout out to McKinley Senior High School, the greatest school in the land. Proud to be an alumni of this great school. And we all say hail, hail, and we love our alma mater, and we love our song. Mr. A.C. Carter penned those words. He's the author of our alma mater. And to write such great words, I wonder if he knew the ramifications of the great song, the great hymn that he composed that still resonates in the hearts and minds of individuals of our school and outside of our school. So shout out to that. Now I mentioned, I posted a map also in the year 1905 of the South Baton Rouge community from Washington Street on down, which we know as the bottom. We've affectionately called it that term, but I wanted to add this to it as I was thinking about what else I was going to say. Highland Road once was called Highlands Wagon Road because, again, it was a highly elevated road. We know that the neighborhood is very hilly terrain within the neighborhood. But as I said, anything past South Baton Rouge, which it was the farthest south that the city went during these years, was swampland, barren land. But also the name the bottom did come from the flooding and did come from the hilly areas. But also this was during a time period, research has discovered that this is where white men would typically go to find black women or go to be entertained or interact in, I guess, nefarious behavior or aberrant behavior. But they would go there to sneak away and be involved with black women. This is another negative connotation of the bottom, and we affectionately call it as such. But the 1905 map gave out the demographics of the streets and how they were named. States and presidents, states going down, presidents going across. Now, Nicholson Drive was once named Natchez Street, and Nicholson, Professor James Nicholson, who was an instructor at LSU in 1917, did a lot for the university. There are two buildings named after him, but Nicholson Drive was changed to, Natchez Street was changed to Nicholson Drive. Now, LSU initially, before it was even built outside of the borders of what we know as South Baton Rouge, it was, as I said, a very hilly area. It was located downtown. The Pentagon Barracks is a structure where Louisiana State University initially began. It's not far from Casino Rouge. Now, oddly enough, this is another snippet that many of us may not know. I'm just throwing this in. Most of the schools that are a part of the SEC traditionally, that are states that were once part of the Confederacy. Every SEC team, school, has a mascot, for the most part, that is symbolic or directly named after a Confederate military, infantry, cavalry, whatever the unit may have been. Louisiana's Confederate, one of the more vicious and revered units of the Confederacy in the state of Louisiana, was the LSU Fighting Tigers, and their banner was purple and gold. So for the most part, when we cheer, those of you that support LSU and root for them, we know that this is the flagship university, but they are named after a Confederate unit. That's why knowing the etymology of a lot of the terms that we use is so important, because we can blindly support a thing. And this may not matter to some of you that this was formerly the name of a Confederate Union. You have the Georgia Bulldogs, the Florida Gators, the Tennessee Volunteers, the Kentucky Wildcats. All these, if you go into the research, you will see that these were the names of Confederate regiments. Anybody want to fact check that, please feel free to do so. And also you have a structure going to the modern campus. I said the initial campus was called the Pentagon Barracks, and on LSU's campus today, there is a structure called the Pentagon Cafeteria. In fact, a lot of us used to work there when we were in high school, part-time jobs working in the cafeteria. I want to mention a little bit about the Garden District, another area right outside that circumferences South Baton Rouge, the area that we know as Old South Baton Rouge. LSU, the Garden District, the river, and on to downtown. This is a very strategically placed neighborhood, but the Garden District was another area where well-to-do those of European descent lived in this area. And most of our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents would walk to the Garden District to serve in some form of domestic capacity, cleaner, gardener, doing work for people, because our education was limited. Now, I talked a little bit, and we all know what a Garden District is. That's that area. There's some very nice houses there, a very old money type neighborhood that's adjacent to City Park, off Park Boulevard, on back to Eugene Street, if I'm not mistaken. But a very prominent neighborhood where a lot of blacks were once employed. Now, you have the bottom and then you have the top. We know that the top is that area that consists of, and which was founded by, as I alluded to in the last video, Rainier Schwartz, who was a German architect who, once he was charged with drawing up the streets and the demographics of the neighborhood after Mayor Robert A. Hart parceled out 900 or so acres that was once Magnolia Mound Plantation when he acquired the land, and then ultimately the city acquired it. But Schwartz developed the names of women running up from Myrtle Street from South Boulevard: Myrtle, Louise, Alice Street, Mary Street, Margaret Street, Vita Street. All these streets that run along Highland Road are named after women. Then you have the area that we call Fruit Town, Apple Orange Path, etc. Shout out to Fruit Town. And then the top or the other area that's closer to Beauregard Town, where some of the streets run up, which have a French connotation. Maximilian, St. Joseph, Raw, France, all those streets. That's kind of what the area where we grew up. And then you cross over East Boulevard, and then you begin to have the numeric street, South 10th, South 11th, South 12th, on up to South 22nd. So not that, I know all of you already know this that live in the area, but I was just pointing out the area that Rainier Schwartz actually named and the time period. So I wanted to say, we're looking at this map that I posted in 1905. You have McKinley coming about in 1907. And then you have Mayor Robert A. Hart being the mayor in 1904. Records have shown that he did a lot to construct and build education, but education, I tell you, was not a major component in the South, especially in Louisiana. Public education was not something that was really even offered for those who categorize themselves as white. The majority of the schools were parochial, religious, private schools. Example, St. Joseph's Academy as well as Catholic High are two of the older parochial schools, meaning run by a church, in the city of Baton Rouge. You really didn't have a major push for public schools because this was basically an agrarian society, meaning a agricultural state. Although education was needed, it was different down here than it was in the North, where education was being provided freely by the municipalities based on their policy or their legislations. So you look at McKinley coming about in 1907, and again, Dr. James A. Frazier. So that was a very positive time, well, not positive, but innovative time did during the early 1900s. But let me jump forward and just say, so we know the legacy and the history of South Baton Rouge, how everything was once thriving, bustling. We know about the Lincoln. We've heard about the McKinley Theater. We know about how East Boulevard was a main thoroughfare. Bonfanny's, Nats, Wagon Wheel, McKinley actually being there. The other club that's right by the East Boulevard Motel, the Wagon Wheel, Nats Bar, all those entities that Bonfanny's, Johnny Liquor Store, True Value Hardware, a main thoroughfare of self-sustaining businesses that developed out of the remnants of a plantation by predominantly black people that just kind of stayed where they were, but in essence they were strategically put there as well. Now, needing a workforce, needing a labor force to, of course, work domestically for the whites in the Garden District and to do the menial labor at LSU if they were allowed. You could go there and work, but you couldn't hang out, et cetera, and it was close. And also to work those jobs downtown on the river. So you see how the area evolved and could be concentrated. But as the area thrived and developed, one of the most detrimental, destructive components that ever were put in place is the development of the I-10 interstate. And why was it purposefully, why was South Baton Rouge chosen to be the location of the interstate? Why couldn't they have pushed that down further? Why couldn't they have decided to use it, on anywhere along the river that could have been built? Because ultimately, this was a major move that decimated and destroyed a community that picked themselves up by their bootstraps, that was formerly a plantation, and to be risen to a self-sustaining, self-operating, profitable neighborhood with well-to-do people living in the community, doctors, lawyers, nurses, the teachers. From what I heard from my research, the majority of the people that taught at McKinley lived in the neighborhood. Principal Keel and all these other people. Mr. Carter, who wrote our alma mater, who I talked about, his house, I found out years ago that his house was right on East Boulevard in Mayflower, right across from St. Agnes's Church. So you had the people that were role models, examples for the youth, mentors actually living in the community. Then you have the coming through the decimation of a total neighborhood being minimalized by a interstate being purposely gerrymandered through the community, destroying houses. In fact, that directly affected my family. My uncle, both my uncles, in fact, Reverend Miles, many of you know, and my uncle Eddie Dio Billups, and my mom, they grew up on South 11th Street. Due to public domain, the city forced them to move. Well, we moved to Maximilian Street because they had, well, not me, but they had to move from Maximilian Street, from South 11th Street to Maximilian Street because the interstate came through there. And in fact, you can see where South 11th Street, where Expressway Park Gym is, it abruptly stops at Myrtle and where St. Francis Xavier Church is. But if you notice, there were some houses when we were growing up that were facing the interstate. And I always thought that was odd that those houses would be facing the interstate. But that was because South 11th Street ran through that way. But when the interstate came, it destroyed or changed the navigation of that as well. Also, with the coming of the interstate, it removed St. Francis Xavier High School. Many of us may have not known that St. Francis Xavier once had a all-black parochial Catholic school that was thriving during this time. But when the interstate came, that was torn down and never to be rebuilt. The interstate came about 1955. I think it opened in 1957, and initially it was called the Baton Rouge Expressway. Thus is why you have and it wasn't the length that we know it today, but this is why you have Expressway Park, because the interstate in the 50s, when it was being created, it was called Baton Rouge Expressway. And there's a lot more things, and it is imperative that if you have an opportunity that you would just try to learn more about the history of your community, some of the members of your community, and just know to know why things are. How did this become the hood? Why are all these black people living in this concentrated area? Also, there's something else I want to say. When some people will use the term ghetto as a derogatory term, ghetto. However, ghetto literally means an area where the individuals dwell are all of the same ethnicity. And this was a term that was used in New York early on, and it's become a derogatory term, the hood, the ghetto, where black poor people live. But based on the etymology and definition of the word, according to Webster's dictionary, a ghetto is not used in a contextual pretense now, but a ghetto is an area where individuals dwell and they are the same in their ethnic background. It could be black, white, Asian, whatever. If you chose to use that verbiage, that would have been appropriate to do so. So this is part 2 of the video. I just wanted to chime in and mention some things that I left out about the neighborhood. And this is a very long process that can be discussed at length. But again, I just wanted to just briefly fill in some gaps, share some information with those of you that may have not known some of the things I said. Hopefully I've shared and enlightened some to our great school and the legacy of our school and the legacy of our community, which is inextricably connected. You cannot have South Baton Rouge without McKinley Senior High School or the McKinley system. McKinley Elementary, McKinley Junior, McKinley Middle, and McKinley High School. This is our creation. This is our own thing. As like uh, as like they say with the La Cosa Nostra, the mafia, this little thing of ours. Well, South Baton Rouge is this little thing of ours. It belongs to us. And if we're not careful with gentrification coming in place, and you've seen the changes, the abandonment, and what's being built now, just be wise and cognizant that there is a plan in place. The plan is being implemented, and property is being gobbled up. Right under our eyes and under our noses. So again, hey guys, go Big Blue. Always investigate the information you receive. If it is indeed the truth, it should stand the test of investigation. Always ask why. Hell.